and I found out that you studied your bachelor's program in America in international studies. So how did you get to Germany, to Europe?
Yes, I'm from America. I'm from Chicago, but I was looking for something to do to change. I was not very happy with my career. I was working I studied international studies, but with a focus on communication. And I was working in an advertising company, which was very fun, but not very fulfilling. So I thought I would go get a master's degree, but education in America is too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I came to Germany. I found this very nice program in Berlin, and I had never been to Berlin before, but I thought, how bad could it be? Like it sounds like a fun city. If I hate it, I will leave. And now it's been 7 years, and this is home for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And you are working for almost 4 years in the project My Country Talks. So how would you characterize your job? And do you consider yourself a journalist, or what's the content of your job right now?
Yes, I'm definitely not a journalist. I don't write, I don't produce. So My Country Talks is this dialogue project that puts people together with two different opinions. And the way that we do that is through a software. And my background is in communications, but it's also in data and product ownership. So I was originally hired to run this software, making sure that the development is going on track, looking at the data and the participant information and doing some kind of analysis, and then also helping our participants and our partners to understand how it works, to use it to their best
Mm-hmm.
ability as well. So that's a lot of my job, is this middle role between the people who are talking to each other and the journalists who are working with us, and then the software developers who are making sure that the
Mm-hmm.
software is like running and being better and making changes.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Okay, and what do you think is the main like purpose of the program? Is it to make people less radical or get rid of the polarization of the society, or it's also about the engagement or the conversation, or to find a partner for a conversation?
Yeah, I think it's two things. On the one hand, it's trying to break people out of their filter bubble, out of their echo chamber. It's very difficult to speak to somebody who truly has different opinions from you, because even on social media, where we're supposed to meet people from all over the world, the algorithms only really give us the content and contact to people who are quite similar. So it's about widening people's perspectives and also showing them that somebody who disagrees with you is still a human, probably has something in common with you, whether it's football team or you both have grandchildren, or there's still this point of human connection.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, it's also very, very hard for journalists to speak to normal people from all parts of the society. So our other work is trying to bring these people closer together with the media and the journalists that we work with, so that the journalists can have better contact to people from every political background, every social background, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you think the society is like becoming more and more polarized? And do you think there is anything to do with the like algorithm on social media, because that's the main source of information people get, young people get information right now?
Yes, definitely. And there are studies that show that societies all over the world are getting more polarized, and younger generations are very polarized. There's also a growing gap between men and women, or male and female people in younger generations. I think it has a lot to do with social media and the information ecosystem, like you just said. But I think it also has to do with multiple crises and the rise of populism and fascism, and people are going into very discrete camps, political groups, because they feel that's a way that they can take back control of like chaos, basically, with a pandemic and war and recession and societal change. You know, people are looking for their people. They don't want to be in touch with the other side because they feel like those people might be responsible for all of this chaos, you know?
I understand that.
Yeah.
And you joined the initiative like in the year 2020,
Yeah.
and that's like 3 years after it began the project.
Yeah.
And right now you are there for 4 years. So what it is in comparison to the year you started in the program right now?
Yeah, I joined in 2020 for a very specific reason, which is that before that, this project was in the newsroom of ZEIT Online. So it was from the journalists. But in that year, 2020, it became a separate nonprofit. So it's still part of the newsroom, but we're legally independent now. And that was because we were able to get more funding from foundations or from the European Commission with having this status. So if I look at what has changed, we've been able to do a lot more projects internationally. So not just in Germany or in Europe, but in Thailand, America, Argentina, Canada, Brazil. Yeah, and we did a project called the World Talks, which connected people from 100 countries together. And that was really thanks to the now independence from the newsroom that we got from setting up our own nonprofit corporate structure. So I think that's the biggest change in 4 years.
Okay. And one of the main goals is to reduce the polarization. And are there any like more specific goals? Is it somehow measurable or more specific?
Yeah. In terms of reducing polarization, we have done 2 studies, academic studies, that try and show that the format actually has some kind of impact, and they do show that. We also have worked with other research institutes, like one in Switzerland and now one in Poland, who do more of a qualitative methodology to measure the impact. So not necessarily on polarization, like the discrete term, but more on people's attitudes or their willingness to cooperate. And they also show that there's been some good impacts from just the one conversation format. The one thing that we're lacking is some kind of long-term study. So we have never gone back a year later and said, is this change really persistent, or has it made like a deeper change in your life or in your attitudes? But that would be our goal in the future.
So you're planning to do something like that?
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay. And do you think that one initiative like this could have an impact on the entire society or society of Germany, or is it more of like presenting into the public that you can talk with different opinions?
I think it's more of the second, presenting to the society, because it's a very complicated program. You have to talk to a stranger. It's an unmoderated conversation. It's about some questions that I think not everybody would like to give an answer to. So something like, right now we're running Europe Talks right now. So that is connecting people with different opinions in different European countries. And we're asking things like, should the EU have an army? Should abortion be a constitutional right in every EU country? Should Ukraine become a member of the EU? And you can only answer these questions with yes and no. And I think that for many people, answering these questions and then talking to somebody who they don't know, who thinks differently, it's a hurdle. You know, not everybody wants to do that, but everybody can read about people who have done this and had a good experience and do a small version of that in their own lives, whether that is having the courage to talk to somebody in a doctor's waiting room or other parents at their children's school, or making more of an effort during holiday family parties to talk about politics and not bring that, leave that at the door and only talk about the weather and, these commercials or TV or something like that. I think that's the bigger impact.
Yes, so it's
Yeah.
more like to talk to each other about everything, like to
Yeah.
connect.
Yeah, and there's no risk. No one will shout at you.
Mm.
Nobody will get violent. Like people have a very good experience, and I think that's what's important to
Mm.
communicate.
And do all the programs work like on the same principles? It's always one-on-one conversations. Yes? Okay.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Mm. And the conversations subjects are always about politics, or there are also more soft subjects or themes?
Yeah, there's a mix. It also depends where we are working. When we run the project, like with Europe Talks or Germany Talks, we decide the questions. But for example, in Thailand, I don't know what's interesting to Thai people. And so then we just give them the software, and we have other partners who will decide the questions and, do the communication material and the programming. So they can say whatever they want. And we've had also soft questions like, I don't know, for example, in Poland, we just finished running Polish talks, and they asked, do you feel proud to be Polish? I
Mm.
think that's a very soft question,
Mm.
but it's still very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how can you apply for the conversation? You just find an active program on your web, answer the questions, and then you wait for an email to
Yeah.
get matched. Yes,
Yeah,
it's like that.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And have you tried some of the conversation with the strangers, and what was the experience?
Yeah, definitely. I've taken part in Europe Talks. It's my favorite of our formats because I'm not German. I'm not, from any specific country, but I feel now after 7 years that Europe is my home. So I really like to connect with people all over the continent, and it's always such a lovely conversation. But what happens is that I have to be transparent and I have to say, like, no, I run this program. And then usually people want to ask me lots of questions about how it works and how I started. And I don't really have like the authentic experience, but it's still such a great way to meet people. Yeah.
And do you think it's possible to talk to anybody? Because I met many people in my life that are just hard to talk to. Then they don't like accept any argument. They are unopen. So do you think it's everyone could be able to join the program, or it's not for everyone? Everyone.
I think everyone could want to, but the moment that you want to, you have to commit. You cannot come with bad intentions or with the idea that you just want to block whatever the other person is saying to you. There are people that come with that idea, and we usually don't even allow them to go into the matching pool. We screen every single person who signs up, and if somebody is writing something that is really hateful
Mm-hmm.
or really non-constructive, we will say, like, this is not the format for you, because we don't want to put their partner in any kind of uncomfortable situation. I think if people don't want to have a constructive conversation, they won't.
Hmm.
And then
So,
you,
have have ever happened that someone like complained about the conversation that it wasn't a pleasant experience? Someone was hateful, or there was a problem, or it's not happening.
not really, because there's so many steps, and we do screen
Mm-hmm.
out people who would write something in their registration that is really hateful. Um, we do have people who write and say, like, oh, my partner didn't really want to talk. We hung up after 15 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
or my partner stopped responding to my emails, and then we never actually had our conversation. That's much more normal than we don't really ever have people write us and say, oh, I had a really bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and I heard that you are working just two people in the organization. Is that right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
how is it to manage all of this? Is that must be really like tricky or
Yeah.
difficult to.
Yeah, it is a lot of work, but like I said, we're like this very small project inside of a huge corporation.
Mhm.
So the newspaper of ZEIT is like thousands of people. So we run these projects on the level of like, the software or the participants making sure that they're comfortable, but the journalists do the reporting. We have accountants who help us pay our bills. Um, we have people who help us manage the partnerships. So it's like two people doing just the core part of the project, but then we have this
Mhm.
infrastructure that helps us with everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have one last question.
Okay.
If there is a program or project you're planning for the future. So right now it's the Europe Talks, and is
Mhm.
there something else you are preparing or?
Yes, so Brazil Talks will launch very soon. We are not using our software for that, but we are part of the consortia that we're giving our methodology to them. So because Brazil is a completely different legal jurisdiction, it doesn't make sense to do this whole GDPR
Mhm.
data storage with our software, but we're helping them to build something themselves that they can do the same thing over there. And then in September, we are doing Germany Talks, that is Deutschland spricht. And it's going to be very important because Germany the last year and this year has many state elections. And the far right party, the AfD, is at some point even like 35% of the vote, especially in the East. So in September, three states in the East will be voting, and there's an expectation that the far right party will win a lot.
Mhm.
So we're launching a big dialogue program to try and get people talking and collaborating and, at least in communication with each other before the whole wave hits us.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about the international programs, do you like travel to the countries, or it's more like that you help them to realize, recreate it, and they manage it their own way in their country?
Yeah, normally the second, we don't normally travel so much. At least in the first 2 years that I worked here because of COVID, we could not. And then we try and go some places when it's feasible, like when we can take the train, but I don't think I will be flying to Brazil, sadly.
And what was your favorite program yet? Is the Germany Talks or?
I think the World Talks was
Oh.
really cool because it was like 100 countries
Mhm.
talking to each other, and I got to meet journalists and media partners from all over the world. That was really impactful for me. But my favorite one so far is a small program that we did in Chemnitz in the east of Germany because I actually got to go there and people came to one place and I got to actually see them talk to each other and be there and watch it happen, which you don't get when it's 100 countries because everybody's meeting in their own meeting platforms or
Mhm.
talking on WhatsApp. And there's something really special about being in a room and seeing, like, even if it's just 50 people have a conversation. I think that was like like the best moment for me of
Mhm.
my job.
Okay.